Picture this. March 8, 1970, Lyons Drag Strip, California. Don Garlits is strapped into his front-engine Dragster, 2,000 horsepower of nitromethane-burning fury, sitting inches from his feet. He hits the throttle. The transmission explodes. The two-speed clutch pack detonates with the force of a grenade, sending shrapnel through the firewall, through the floorboard, and through Don Garlits' right foot. The car splits in half at 180 miles per hour. When the safety crew reaches him, half his foot is gone, severed at the arch. Blood is pooling in what's left of the cockpit. Don Garlits, the most successful drag racer in history, is done, or so everyone thought. What happened next would completely revolutionize drag racing, save countless lives, and cement Don Garlits' legacy, not just as a racer, but as an engineering visionary who saw what nobody else could see. This is the story of how losing half a foot led to the most important innovation in drag racing history, the rear-engine dragster. To understand the magnitude of what Garlits accomplished, you need to understand what drag racing looked like in 1970. Every single top-fuel dragster ran the same basic configuration: a massive supercharged engine mounted in front of the driver, a two-speed transmission, and a differential connected by a short drive shaft. The driver sat directly behind the engine, clutch, and transmission. It was like strapping yourself to the back of a bomb and hoping it only exploded in the right direction. The physics made sense, though. Front-engine cars had been winning races since drag racing began in the 1950s. The weight of that massive engine over the front wheels helped with traction during launch. The long wheelbase provided stability at speed. Every successful team ran this configuration. Chrysler Hemi engines dominated, making 1,800 to 2,000 horsepower on nitromethane. Quarter-mile times had dropped below 6 seconds. Speeds exceeded 240 miles per hour. But there was a problem nobody wanted to talk about. Between 1965 and 1970, drag racing had killed or maimed dozens of drivers. Transmission explosions were the worst. When a clutch pack let go at 8,000 RPM, it turned into shrapnel traveling at bullet speeds. The cast-iron bell housing might as well have been made of paper. Drivers lost feet, legs, hands. Some bled out before help arrived. The sport was earning a reputation as a death wish on wheels. Don Garlits knew the dangers better than anyone. By 1970, he'd been racing for 20 years. He'd built 32 different versions of his famous Swamp Rat dragsters, each one an evolution of the last. He held the speed record at 243.24 miles per hour. He'd won the NHRA Nationals, the Bakersfield March Meet, the prestigious U.S. Nationals 3 times. His innovative engineering had already changed the sport. He was the first to use a wing for downforce, the first to break 170, 180, 200, and 240 miles per hour. They called him Big Daddy because he was the father figure of drag racing. But lying in that hospital bed at Pomona Valley Hospital, missing half his right foot, Garlits had time to think. The doctors saved what they could, but he'd never walk normally again. Racing seemed impossible. The clutch pedal required precise control, and half his foot was gone. His wife Pat begged him to retire. He was 38 years old, wealthy from racing, with nothing left to prove. Here's where it gets interesting. Instead of retiring, Garlits became obsessed with a radical idea. What if the entire sport had it backwards? What if putting the engine in front of the driver was fundamentally wrong? He started sketching designs from his hospital bed. Put the engine behind the driver. Move the danger zone away from the cockpit. If the transmission exploded, it would blow out the back, not through the driver's legs. The racing community thought he'd lost his mind, along with his foot. Rear-engine dragsters had been tried before. Mickey Thompson built one in 1954. It handled terribly. Tony Nancy tried in 1964. It couldn't get traction. The Dodge Colt Funny Car team experimented with one in 1969. It was slower than conventional designs. The physics seemed impossible to overcome. Without weight over the front wheels, The car would wheel stand uncontrollably. Without the long nose for stability, it would be impossible to control at speed. Garlits didn't care what people thought. By December 1970, 9 months after losing half his foot, he was in his shop in Seffner, Florida, building Swamp Rat 14. His approach was different from everyone who'd tried before. Instead of simply moving the existing components around, he redesigned everything from first principles. The chassis was chromoly steel tubing, 220 inches long, actually longer than most front-engine cars. This gave him the stability everyone said rear-engine cars couldn't have. The cockpit moved forward, right between the front wheels. This put the driver's weight where it was needed for steering control. The engine, a 426 cubic inch Chrysler Hemi making 2,000 horsepower, sat behind the driver directly over the rear axle. This was the key insight everyone else had missed. You didn't need weight transfer from the front to the rear during launch. You needed the weight already there. The engineering was meticulous. The supercharged Hemi weighed 680 pounds. The TorqueFlite transmission added another 145 pounds. The differential was 95 pounds. That's over 900 pounds of mass sitting directly over the giant M&H slicks. When Garlits hit the throttle, instead of the front end lifting and weight transferring reward, all that mass was already pushing down on the drive wheels. Instant traction. But weight distribution was only part of the equation. Garlits also pioneered a completely new aerodynamic approach. Front-engine cars created massive amounts of lift at speed. The long nose acted like an airplane wing. Drivers had to fight to keep the front end down. Garlits' rear-engine design eliminated this problem. The short nose created minimal lift. The driver sat in clean air. A rear wing provided adjustable downforce directly over the drive wheels. The clutch system required complete reimagination. In a front-engine car, the clutch connected the engine to the transmission through a short shaft. In Garlits' design, the clutch was part of a revolutionary direct drive system. 3 discs, 18 inches in diameter, made from sintered iron, compressed by 3,600 pounds of spring pressure. This meant no drive shaft, no universal joints, no power loss. The engine's crankshaft connected directly to the differential input. Every single horsepower went straight to the wheels. The safety improvements were revolutionary. The driver sat ahead of all the dangerous components. If the engine exploded, the debris would go backward. If the transmission failed, it was 20 feet behind the driver. If the differential broke, same thing. Garlits installed a ballistic shield between the cockpit and engine, quarter-inch steel plate that could stop shrapnel. The fuel tank moved to the front between the driver's legs, but protected by the chassis. In a front-end collision, the driver's legs wouldn't hit the engine block. Testing began in January 1971. The first runs were disasters. The car was impossible to steer in a straight line. The short wheelbase from the front axle to the driver meant tiny steering inputs created massive direction changes. Garlits couldn't keep it in his lane. Other racers laughed. They'd been right all along. Rear engine was a pipe dream. Garlits went back to the drawing board. The problem was the steering geometry. In a front-engine car, the driver sits far behind the front wheels, so the steering ratio can be quick. In his rear-engine design, sitting right over the front wheels, that same ratio made the car twitchy. He redesigned the entire steering system. Longer steering arms, different angles, more caster in the front suspension, larger diameter steering wheel for finer control. Second problem, the clutch was too aggressive. With all that weight already over the rear wheels, the tires would break loose violently. In a front-engine car, you wanted an aggressive clutch to get weight transfer started. Here, you needed the opposite. Garlits developed a progressive engagement system, softer initial bite, then gradually increasing pressure. The engineering required custom ground friction surfaces with specific coefficient patterns. Third problem, the car was too light in front. Yes, you wanted weight over the drive wheels, but you needed enough mass up front for stability. Garlits added ballast, 70 pounds of lead mounted low in the nose. This brought the weight distribution to 82% rear, 18% front. Any more rear bias, and the car would wheel stand. Any less, and he'd lose traction advantage. By March 1971, exactly 1 year after his accident, Garlits had it figured out. At the Gator Nationals in Gainesville, Florida, he showed up with Swamp Rat 14. The other racers treated it like a circus act. Don the Snake Prudhomme said it looked like Garlits had built his car backwards. Tom Mongoose McEwen joked that Garlits had finally lost it. The track announcers called it experimental and controversial. First qualifying run, 6.77 seconds at 218 miles per hour. Not a record, but respectable. The car went perfectly straight, no wheel stand, no handling problems. Second qualifying run, 6.61 seconds at 223 miles per hour. Now people were paying attention. In eliminations, Garlits made it to the semifinals before losing to Steve Carbone's front-engine car. But he'd proven the concept worked. Here's what the other teams noticed immediately. Garlits could see the entire track. In a front-engine car, that massive blown Hemi blocks your forward vision. You literally can't see the Christmas tree starting lights without leaning sideways. You can't see the center line. At 240 miles per hour, you're essentially driving blind, using peripheral vision and hoping you're going straight. Garlits could see everything. Perfect view of the tree, the track, the finish line. The psychological advantage was massive. In a front-engine car, you're sitting behind 2,000 horsepower of controlled explosion, hoping nothing fails. Every run could be your last. In Garlits' car, all the danger was behind him. He could focus on driving, not dying. But the real advantage showed up in the data. Rear-engine cars were more consistent. Front-engine cars relied on weight transfer, which varied based on track temperature, tire pressure, humidity, and a dozen other factors. Sometimes you'd get perfect transfer and run fast. Sometimes the front end would bounce and you'd lose 0.2 of a second. Garlits' car didn't care about weight transfer. The weight was already there. His times varied by less than 0.05 seconds run to run. The aerodynamics were superior too. A front-engine car created a massive high-pressure zone at the nose, turbulent air along the body, and a low-pressure wake behind. Total drag coefficient around 0.65. Garlits' car, with its short nose and enclosed cockpit, tested at 0.41. Less drag meant higher top speed for the same power. It also meant less fuel consumption, so he could run a smaller tank, saving more weight. June 19, 1971. Lakeland International Dragway. Garlits runs 6.41 seconds at 231.88 miles per hour, a new track record. The rear-engine car wasn't just competitive, it was faster than front-engine designs. The racing world couldn't ignore it anymore. But here's the kicker. Other teams started building their own rear-engine cars, and they were failing miserably. Jim Bucker built one and crashed it. Roy Tyner built one that wouldn't hook up. The Greek Chris Karamesines built one that handled like a shopping cart. They were copying the layout but missing the engineering details. The secret was in the subtleties. Garlits had spent months perfecting weight distribution, not just moving it rearward, but getting the center of gravity exactly right. Too low, and the car would bog. Too high, and it would be unstable. He'd calculated the exact point 17 inches off the ground where the car would squat under acceleration without lifting the front end. The tire technology was crucial. M&H Tire Company had developed new compounds specifically for Garlits' car. The rubber needed different characteristics when the weight was already there versus transferring during launch. Softer sidewalls to absorb the initial hit. Harder compound in the center for top-end stability. The tire pressure was critical. 4.5 psi, not the usual 5.5 psi front-engine cars ran. The psychological barriers were enormous. Imagine you've been driving front-engine cars for 20 years. Every instinct, every reflex, every piece of muscle memory is wrong in a rear-engine car. The balance is different. The view is different. The way it launches, accelerates, and stops, all different. Most drivers couldn't adapt. They'd get scared sitting that far forward, feeling like they were going to tip over the nose. By September 1971, Garlits won the NHRA Nationals at Indianapolis Raceway Park. 6:21 seconds at 234.98 miles per hour, he beat every front-engine car in the field. This wasn't a fluke anymore. The rear-engine configuration was simply better. The establishment fought back. Some tracks tried to ban rear-engine cars, claiming they were unsafe. Ironic, given that front-engine cars were literally killing people. The NHRA considered putting them in a separate class. Traditional teams lobbied against them, saying they violated the spirit of drag racing. The automotive media called them ugly, ungainly, wrong-looking. But physics doesn't care about tradition. By the end of 1971, Don Prudhomme was building a rear-engine car. So was Tom McEwen. Connie Kalitta ordered one. Within 6 months, half the field had switched. By 1973, you couldn't win without a rear-engine car. The last front-engine top-fuel victory was Rich Sirunian at the 1972 Winter Nationals. After that, it was all rear-engine. The safety statistics were undeniable. In 1969, drag racing had 7 fatalities in top fuel. In 1970, 6 deaths and dozens of serious injuries. In 1972, after the rear-engine revolution, 2 deaths. By 1975, 0 fatalities in top fuel for the first time in the sport's history. The rear-engine design had literally saved lives. Let's talk about the engineering legacy. Every single top fuel dragster today, everyone uses Garlits' basic configuration. The engines have grown from 426 to 500 cubic inches. Power has increased from 2,000 to over 11,000 horsepower. Quarter-mile times have dropped from 6 seconds to under 4 seconds. Speeds have exceeded 330 miles per hour. But the fundamental layout, engine behind driver, direct drive to rear wheels, aerodynamic cockpit, remains unchanged from Swamp Rat 14. The influence spread beyond drag racing. Rear engine became standard in Formula One. IndyCar adopted it. Sprint cars went rear engine. The engineering principles Garlits pioneered, weight distribution optimization, aerodynamic efficiency, driver safety through component placement, influenced all forms of motorsport. Garlits himself kept innovating. Swamp Rat 15 through 38 each refined the concept. He was first to break 250 miles per hour in 1975, first to break 270 in 1986. He won 144 major events, 17 national championships. He retired in 1992 at age 60, still competitive, still innovating. The technical deep dive reveals just how revolutionary this was. The moment arm physics were completely different. In a front-engine car, the center of gravity was typically 85 inches behind the front axle. During launch, weight transfer created a moment arm that could lift the front wheels 3 feet off the ground. Drivers had to feather the throttle to keep the nose down, losing acceleration. In Garlits' design, the center of gravity was 140 inches behind the front axle, but only 28 inches ahead of the rear axle. The moment arm for lifting the front end was minimal. The driver could go full throttle immediately. No feathering, no wheel spin, no wasted energy. The physics favored acceleration over rotation. The structural engineering was revolutionary too. Front-engine chassis design was compromised by having to route around the engine. Frame rails had to be narrow at the front, widening toward the rear. This created stress concentrations and flex points. Garlits' rear-engine chassis could use straight parallel rails from front to rear. Uniform strength, predictable flex characteristics, easier to tune for different track conditions. The cooling was superior. Front-engine cars struggled with heat management. The radiator blocked airflow to the engine. The headers dumped heat into the cockpit. Drivers suffered burns from radiant heat. Oil temperatures exceeded 300 degrees. Garlits' car had the engine in clean air. Natural convection carried heat away from the driver. Oil temps stayed under 250 degrees. The driver stayed comfortable, focused, consistent. Consider the maintenance advantages. To work on a front-engine car's transmission, you had to pull the entire body off, 8 hours minimum. On Garlits' car, the transmission was accessible from above, 2 hours to rebuild. Clutch changes that took all night now took 2 hours. Teams could make more runs, gather more data, develop faster. The cost savings were enormous. Front-engine cars destroyed parts constantly. The violent weight transfer broke suspension components. The chassis twisted and cracked. Engines scattered from the stress. Garlits' car was so much easier on parts that teams could run entire seasons on one short block. Clutches lasted 3 times longer. Chassis stayed straight for years instead of races. Now here's something most people don't know. The aerodynamic advantages went beyond just drag. Reduction. Front-engine cars created lift that increased exponentially with speed. At 200 miles per hour, a typical front-engine car generated 800 pounds of lift. At 240 miles per hour, over 200 pounds. The car literally wanted to fly. Drivers described it as driving on ice at top end. Garlits' car generated downforce. The short nose created minimal lift, maybe 100 pounds at 240. The rear wing generated 400 pounds of downforce directly over the rear wheels. The net effect was 300 pounds pushing the car down onto the track at maximum speed. Better traction, better stability, better safety. The car got more stable as it went faster, not less. The human factors were game-changing. In a front-engine car, the driver experienced 5.5 Gs of acceleration, but because he sat behind the center of gravity, he also experienced a rotational force trying to flip him backward. The combined effect was disorienting, exhausting, sometimes causing blackouts. In Garlits' car, sitting near the center of gravity, the driver experienced pure linear acceleration. Still 5.5 Gs, but no rotation. Drivers could stay conscious, alert, in control. The fire safety was revolutionary. Front-engine cars had the fuel tank directly behind the engine. In a fire, flames swept straight back into the driver's face. Burn injuries were common, sometimes fatal. Garlits put the fuel tank ahead of the driver, but behind a firewall. If the tank ruptured, fuel sprayed forward, away from the driver. The airflow carried flames backward, away from the cockpit. Not a single driver has died from burns in a rear-engine top-fuel car. Let's talk about the clutch innovation nobody discusses. Front-engine cars used sintered iron discs with radial grooves for oil evacuation. But in Garlits' direct drive system, those grooves created harmonic vibrations at certain RPMs. He developed a spiral groove pattern that evacuated oil while canceling harmonics. The clutch could handle 20% more power without increasing size or weight. Every top fuel car today uses spiral groove clutches. The psychological impact on the sport was profound. Before Garlits, drag racing was seen as brave men wrestling dangerous machines. After Garlits, it became a scientific pursuit. Teams hired engineers, computers analyzed data, wind tunnels tested aerodynamics. The rear-engine revolution didn't just change the cars, it professionalized the entire sport. The business impact was massive. Insurance companies had been abandoning drag racing. Too many deaths, too many lawsuits. After the rear-engine revolution, insurers came back. Prize money increased, sponsorships grew, television coverage expanded. The sport went from underground outlaws to mainstream entertainment, all because one man figured out how to make it survivable. Consider the international influence. Australian drag racing adopted rear-engine immediately. European teams who'd struggled with front-engine designs suddenly became competitive. Japanese engineers studied Garlits' designs and applied the principles to their own motorsports. The rear-engine dragster became America's most successful racing export. The patent story is fascinating. Garlits never patented the rear-engine dragster design. When asked why, he said, "I wanted everyone to copy it. I wanted everyone to be safe." He gave away millions in potential licensing fees because he'd seen too many friends die. That decision saved dozens of lives and transformed the sport forever. Modern top fuel cars make 11,000 horsepower. They accelerate from 0 to 100 miles per hour in 0.8 seconds. They pull 5.7 Gs off the line. They reach 335 miles per hour in 1,000 feet. Drag strips don't even run the full quarter mile anymore because the speeds got too dangerous. None of this would be possible with front-engine designs. The chassis would break, the drivers would black out, the cars would flip. Every innovation in modern drag racing builds on Garlits' foundation. Carbon fiber bodies follow his aerodynamic principles. Multi-stage clutch management systems evolved from his progressive engagement design. Data acquisition systems mount where he put the first sensors. Even the safety capsules that saved drivers like Larry Dixon and Antron Brown in spectacular crashes are evolutions of Garlits' original driver cell concept. The man himself is still alive at 92 years old. He owns the Museum of Drag Racing in Ocala, Florida, where Swamp Rat 14 sits in the place of honor. He still has the engineering drawings, the original calculations, the test data from 1971. When young engineers visit, he tells them the same thing. Don't accept that something's right just because it's always been done that way. Sometimes you have to flip everything around to see the solution. Think about that for a second. Every top fuel dragster on Earth exists because one man refused to accept that nearly getting killed was just part of racing. He lost half his foot and gained a vision that nobody else could see. While lying in a hospital bed, blood soaking through bandages, he didn't plot revenge or wallow in self-pity. He grabbed a pencil and started drawing the future. The racing establishment mocked him. Physics seemed against him. Tradition condemned him. But Don Garlits had something more powerful than convention. He had engineering principles and the courage to trust them. In 1 year, he transformed a sport that had existed for 2 decades, not through incremental improvement, but through fundamental reimagination. Today, when a top fuel dragster launches down a track, the driver sits in what racers call the office. A carbon fiber safety cell descended directly from Garlits' original design. They experience acceleration that fighter pilots can't match, speeds that approach supersonic, all while maintaining control and, crucially, surviving. Every single one of those 10,000 runs per year across the world happens because Don Garlits decided there had to be a better way. The next time you see a dragster, really look at it. That bizarre praying mantis shape, engine hanging out the back like an afterthought, driver perched impossibly far forward. It looks wrong because your brain expects the danger to be in front, protection behind. But that's exactly backward. Sometimes the most profound innovations require us to literally turn our thinking around. What revolutionary idea are you dismissing because it goes against everything you've been taught? What fundamental assumption in your field might be completely backward? Don Garlits shows us that sometimes losing something precious, even half your foot, gives you the clarity to see what everyone else is missing. Drop a comment about the most counterintuitive innovation you've ever seen. What invention succeeded specifically because it did the opposite of common sense? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into drag racing engineering, make sure to subscribe because we're just getting started exploring the revolutionary machines that changed motorsports forever.